Do you want us to use a mic? Do you want us to use a mic? Can you hear us? Yeah? So should I go? Because Simon did the segue to me. I'm Nairy, and a lot of people say I'm Norsk, Nairy Orsk, but really I'm more than that. I've been a coach for about 10 years, and the last 5 years purely doing systemic coaching using the ORSC tools. So I run the ORSC business here and work with many, many teams in the UK and abroad to facilitate team coaching. And what we have in common with Scott and with Philip is that we're all ORSC trained. Just before we go, I just want to know who else is here who's ORSC trained or has done the introductory course. Yeah, welcome. And so this is why we are doing this together as a community. We're presenting what ORSC is as a community.
Can I go next?
Yeah.
No. Thank you very much. Hi everyone, my name's Scott Cable. I've been working in software development for about 22 years or so. I started off as a developer, became kind of like a technical lead, let's say, moved into project management probably around 15 years ago, and then gradually between then and now I've just been getting more and more into being a lean agile practitioner. I got my Scrum Master around 10 years ago, and now I've recently been embracing and getting really interested in systems coaching, which is what ORSC is all about, and what hopefully we'll be exploring a bit this evening.
Experiencing even. Thank you. And I'm Philippe. As you can tell, I'm a local from South London. I've been in London for 23 years or thereabout. Worked in digital change and delivery of software and just fell into the agile portion at some point. And now I'm sort of a recovering consultant, I would say, moving more towards coaching. Like Simon explained, I believe that for organizations to truly move into digital adoption, that needs to be adopted from the inside, and that shouldn't be brought by a consultant from the outside. So I'm looking at developing the people that develop the solution, people and leadership that develop the solutions. That's me.
Great, so let's get started then. So what we're going to be exploring this evening is how the way we coach impacts the success of our clients and projects. But before we get into that, what I'd like you all to do is just to kind of give us an idea of who's in the room. So can you stand up if you are a project manager? Can you stand up if you are an agile coach? You can stay standing, it's fine. Can you stand up if you are a Scrum Master? Okay, has anyone not stood up yet? Can you just shout out what you do and what brings you here?
Transformation lead, agile transformation.
Okay, anyone else?
I support the agile coaching transformation team.
Okay, okay, great. Welcome.
Anyone else?
I'm a doctor, I train doctors.
Welcome. So, and everyone you can sit down now, so I just thought I'd kind of get you all standing up for a second. So I'd just like you to kind of have a think about something and find a partner, can be anyone. It'd be great if you could find someone right across the room from you to get those legs moving. But could you just discuss with a partner what your high dream is or what your high expectations are for this evening? And we're going to give you about 5 minutes for that. Okay?
So go up and find someone you don't know, say hello, say your name, and say why you came here.
Thank you, everybody. Do you want to pop up some things that came out? Popcorn style, come on, come on.
What does OSC stand for?
Organization and Relationship System Coaching. Whoa, I passed.
So Annika was saying that she was wondering how you actually make all of this work on a large scale where normally we might work with small.
It works on both sides.
But
Large
how
or small?
practically? How, you know, if you've got 400 people, how do you do it versus, you know, it's easy or easier if you've got 8, 10.
And
We'll practice that tonight.
yeah, because even the size that we have, it's quite large,
Yeah.
and then you'll see how it's done and how it feels. We just need a bigger space, but you can do it. And good context setting, like explaining what OSC is.
And are you talking specifically about what we're going to do this evening, or just generally? Because this is just one tool we're going to be exploring from OSC.
Generally, and if it happens.
Yeah,
It
so
happens
there's different
big facilitations. We get up to 10,000 people. Can do it. Yeah.
different tools suit different numbers of people as well.
All right. So if you want to sit back at your space, we're going to start the session. There is really tonight no right and wrong, and we are, as coaches, equally as excited as you probably are, because tonight is about exploring, your range as coach or leaders, and we are curious also, and curiosity is one of our skills we're bringing, to learn what's in the community. So we're going to learn as much as we're going to coach tonight. And that's going to be very true to the principles of system intelligence, where the intelligence and the creativity comes from the system. So you're our system tonight, and we are your coaching system tonight. We're going to follow an agenda where we're going to do some education around the meta skills and explaining what may look like a star, but it's a meta skill wheel. And then we'll ask you to stand up to use it. And we'll do 2 practice rounds on this. And then we'll do a debrief. And the debrief will be important for coming out the new knowledge and the new wisdom from your system tonight. But before we do this work, in system work, we establish the right context. And Nairy will lead us through that.
So organization, relationship, systems coaching is a modality of coaching that embraces the systemic perspective. So systemic perspective is looking at the whole, not just the individual parts. And the main premise is that that we are all conscious and intentional at every aspect of our interactions with each other. So most of the time we go through and meet people and say hello and start work without consciously designing how we're going to be. So with this modality, we're very conscious right from the start. It's a tool that we use that's called Designing a Team Alliance, but it's ways of working. So what you do is when you first come and get engaged with a team, or if you're a team leader, is you start establishing some norms as how you're going to be when things are great and how you're going to be when things aren't great. So this evening, that's not the tool we're going to be focusing on, but we wanted to bring that so you get a sense that that's how the process of systemic coaching starts. And just to make things very easy for this evening, we've just come up with 3 things that we would like to hold as a whole system together, which is to be curious about what we're going to do. So experience it and see what it's like for you. Courage, because we are going to ask you to stand up and do this thing, kind of like a dance routine on these stars. Respect. Respect that, it might not work for everyone, so not everybody wants to join in, that's fine. You might not get everything, and respect yourself for it. Just allow the time to pass and see what comes out for you. So as facilitators, we also like some things from you. There's a systems rule, if I can find it.
Everybody is right. Only partially.
That sort of dovetails in with the request for respect. So everybody is right, only partially. Okay? How does that land?
Silence.
Silence.
Sounds like social science.
What do you mean? Say a bit more.
Because in social science, everything is right, but only
Partially, exactly. So you need to hear from everyone to get the full facts. Yeah? That's what it is. And what else would I like to say? It's a big group. So we're going to be doing some exercises. So if we raise our hands, can we just ask everybody to raise your hand as well? It's kind of like a wave, and then be quiet so that we can give the next instruction. And some of you may have already experienced what we're going to be presenting. Some of you are also trained. So just come in with a beginner's mind and just give it a go and see how it goes. You'll get new information if you've done this before. Yeah? Is there anything else you want to add?
Don't think so.
No? Okay.
Maybe the fact that it's an experience, so you really need to sink in what we're going to do and really get into that body experience for yourselves.
So maybe
That's
that is
how
a
you're going to benefit from it.
That's a great point. We're experiential trainers, so you learn from experience. Some of the concepts that we're going to be using need definitions around it, but we're not going to go too deep into it. We're just going to ask you to experience it. Thank you, Philippe.
So speaking of embodiment, meta skills. Meta skills. Nope, nope. Can I keep that one up? Okay, thanks. So that's what meta skills are, but I thought I'd just try and bring a bit of an example. So if I just take a deep breath and just think about how I feel for a moment, I feel quite anxious. And when you feel anxious, that will tend to trigger a stress response. And that stress response response results in different hormones being released in your body. And the purpose of those hormones is to make you think faster and run faster because you feel as if you've been threatened by something. Now, I don't think being able to run out of this room is really going to help me to deliver or facilitate this evening. So what I've got to do is I've got to try and bring something else to that in order to bring a version of myself which is more apt to this context. So I could choose something like curiosity. I could think to myself, I don't feel good right now. Why is that? What's happening? What can I do about it? Can anyone else, does anyone else feel like that when they're standing in front of a bunch of people they've only met this evening? Or I could bring courage to that. Now, courage means the ability to do something that scares us. So someone's already come up with a word to describe what I'm doing right now. So courage is kind of not running away, it's staying fixed to the ground, and I can use that. Or I could bring in congruence. Now, congruence is doing something that's in tune with something I feel that's important or in line with my values. This is important to me. So I'm going to bring that to the situation. I'm not pushing the anxiety away, but what I'm trying to say is I'm bringing other things into the picture, and these things are meta skills, and what that gives me are other resources in order for me to do a better job at serving you. So that's meta skills. Silence.
Playful is all right as well.
Yes. That's when I should probably try a bit more.
So just to recap, it's the attitude, philosophy, or stance for which the coach creates. So you can create the stance that you want to come from. Now, this is a concept that was made popular by Amy Mindell. So you can Google her and look her up if you're interested. And lots and lots of, it's not original to ORSC, lots of people use it for different reasons. What is sort of something that we use in ORSC? what is unique to ORSC is that we use Metaskill Wheel, which is what you see here. It's a problem-solving tool. It's using the attitude and come-from place of a meta-skill to solve a problem or to get new perspective on something, on a topic that is of interest to the team. So it's coming from, not from any instruction, but from the experience of an attitude to see what new information you can get. I can explain further, but really the best way to learn is to experience this tool yourself and see what you think of it. All right? Cool.
And that's why I'm going to be the bearer of bad news.
Why?
Now you're going to stand for the next hour.
Yes.
So please, if you want to stand.
Can I just ask, just before you do that, these words, so can I just say that one thing is, it's intentionally creating the space you want. You can use anything. You can use company values, team values, anything you want to intentionally create what you want. We have created something. We have picked words which we think will serve tonight's topic. Some of these words may not have meaning for you. Just experience it. See what inspires inside of you. So don't try to find a definition. Just explore it. Okay?
And what if there are questions around what a certain word means? Are we just going to go with it or try and address it?
I think we're just going to leave it. Try not to think too much around the word. Just experience it and see what it's like. Philippe will guide you through the questions and they'll give you ideas where you should be going. Okay?
So this is the wheel made of wedges, and we're going to ask you to roam the wheel and take some time in each wedge to actually really experience and inside yourself those words, those meta skills, as you would apply them into your coaching, or leadership. So if you're a leader and a coach, you turn up, you help your teams, and you will come from one of those meta skills potentially. So please stand up, go around in silence on each of the wedges, and really take time, and we're going to do this for about 5 minutes, take time to let it sink in relation to your coaching, what you feel comfortable with. Okay? I'll move a little bit outside.
And just to let you know, there's a blank one, so if none of them work for you, be curious about the blank one. All right. Are we ready? We all ready? Thank you. Okay, so now it's show and tell time. Which team wants to go first?
We will.
Okay. So this is what we're going to do. You're going to say your meta skill, show us the gesture, and say a few words about strengths and challenges.
Okay. So so deep democracy. So we'll show the gesture. Are you ready?
Yeah, lovely.
So do you want me to tell you about what the gesture represents? Yeah. It represents basically going deep to get really deep to get everybody's voice in the system. Actually, the coming up together is actually bringing the voice of the system out, everybody's voice. Anybody got something to add?
just that sometimes it's difficult to make a deep squat. Our backs hurt, our clothes may be too tight, and it just represents how deep democracy is challenging for us all.
Very good. All right. So which way do you want to go? Left or right of you?
Oh yes. How do we make a choice? Consensus. What's the consensus in our group, guys?
So that could
Clockwise seems to be the consensus.
Okay.
So who's going to be doing who would like the mic?
Hello. Yes, our meta skill is non-attachment. We had a gesture which is kind of like this, and that represents sort of letting go, but being open as well. So not in a closed way, kind of remaining open. Anyone want to add anything?
Yeah, I can add something. So it's trying not to allow yourself to be like drawn in to what's actually happening and trying to actively remain outside of the event that's happening.
Any problems with that? What's tough about it?
It's emotionally tough not to become involved with someone who you want to be attached to, but you can't allow yourself to be.
I'd also say that sometimes you become attached to ideas and concepts and your plan maybe when working with a group. And sometimes it takes courage to sort of, if the group's not responding to that or the system's not responding, to let go and go with their agenda. So that can be a challenge.
No? So from non-attachment to courage.
Yeah, so we had quite a few.
We have your gesture first.
Oh yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, so we had a few different things. So courage is part of challenging the status quo and be able to do that. It's also, when you're in an environment and you're working a certain way, having the courage just to stand up and say, to do it differently. Terence, you had something else, didn't you?
It's really creating a path for those who follow, who are brave enough to do anything themselves, or take the issue with both hands and make the path and offer it to people to use. Not force them, but just offer it.
And one of the challenges is when you're being courageous and doing things is to keep your empathy and listen to others rather than just, being courageous and setting a new way of going or challenging the current way of going. Is there anything else?
There's something around, along to what you were just saying, is having courage towards oneself, and by allowing yourself to show vulnerability and recognize that there may be other meta skills where you need to grow as well, and that takes a lot of courage.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
What's tough in the courage part?
I guess
Yeah, what's difficult about adopting?
I guess sometimes when you're being courageous, it could come across as you're criticizing other people, and people can easily become offended, especially if they're not used to your way of working. And if you're being too courageous, you can get into serious trouble for this way. That can create lots of problems for you down the road, in my opinion.
Yeah, so you may be seen as a dominant personality, loudest voice in the room, and that's something to, well, in my opinion, that we should strive to avoid, right? So, in expressing your courage, you don't want to become that person. Yeah, and yes. So I guess the final point was is the courageousness. It does, to change yourself actually is so having the courage to change yourself as you're starting out with is, and accepting that in the moment. It can actually take courage to enact that and to become that in the moment. So.
Self-reflection.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. You like to? No? Respect? Who likes to do the... Should we see the gesture first?
Start it off.
There you go.
Thank you very much. So a lot of what we thought about respect had to do with creating an environment of respect, such that that is a ground rule that we start with and we maintain all throughout. So we want to maintain that and just be champions of that, of course, but it underpins everything. I think it very clearly underpins a lot of these things. If we see each other with respect, that means that if we have disagreements and we're being courageous, we're going to lean into it. We're going to say, okay, well, your difference is actually appreciated. We don't have to kind of knock each other down. We can just really look at each other as having value, and it becomes a bit more of a flat structure rather than, well, my job is more important than yours. And it's like, well, no, it's all equal in that regard. We'll probably solve a lot of problems a lot easier that way and see each other's value and get more out of the difference rather than leaning away from the difference. Is there anything else?
Well, the only comment I was going to make was just to say that we see respect very much as being a two-way street. So it's not a hierarchy of respect. It should be respect amongst equals.
And how easy is it to come up and to have this skill of respect, this meta skill of respect when you coach people or you lead people?
How easy?
How easy and how tough, actually?
I'd say from a personal viewpoint, as I was saying to these guys, I've not been the expert in anything I've needed to get done for the last 20 years. So from that viewpoint, if I'm not going to respect the opinions that's been given to me, then I'm not going to get very far. What I find more difficult to deal with is when they have the expert, and then and everyone goes, he must or she must have the answers to the problems, and trying to level out that playing field, because what you then end up with is a bottleneck and everyone turning to one person. That person should have more respect for their colleagues and pass down the power and the authority to actually get things done in a more effective way. So I think it's very much a level, we want a level playing field of respect. Anybody else?
I was just going to say you said what's hard? It's the judgment element. So that's for me, and building on your point about expertise, I had to train myself to not be that, where you are the expert and then...
It will happen naturally.
But it's a natural but that's the thing, you want to behave in this way so that you aren't seen as the panacea to everyone's problems, but you're there to help people solve their own problems. That's the hard bit. It's a good challenge.
And that's nice to see as well. There's quite a few of you in respect, being a key meta skills that you bring. So that's something that is very obviously important and present in this community.
Right, disturbance as an ally. Should we go with your gesture? Yeah, the gesture represents the disturbing of the status quo, changing it, mixing it up. What really came up about this for me was the fact that being a disturbance to a system is relatively easy. Being an ally is relatively easy, but doing both at the same time, less so. And I think that's what really speaks to me about this. Is it's something I'm trying to actively do a lot more of at the moment. I'm trying to help shake people up, but with the understanding that I'm doing it for the benefit of you guys, of the team that I'm with. But I think it requires some agreement early on that says, whatever I do, I'm doing it for your benefit, and establishing that up front.
I think a lot of times, particularly with the developers, etc., who aren't used to working in teams, they like to work on their own, breaking down those barriers, taking them somewhere else out of the office maybe to do learning, so all those official hierarchies are gone, helps them then start learning and go on a new path to where they want to get to.
I just say that for me, disturbance, it creates opportunities to work with people. It kind of opens doors in their mind in terms of saying if things are stable, people don't question things as much, but when there's a disturbance, they become unstable. They start to kind of question and look around for answers, and that kind of is a way in to work with them.
Anything else you want to say? Yeah? Can I just ask to see that gesture one more time? I'll go on. Not that I have a favourite one, but no. Oh.
We're going on to congruence now. You want to show us your gesture?
Can I just ask, what happens when the gestures are done? What happens to the emotion in this room? It changes, doesn't it?
In agreement that being congruent with especially your values when at work is really important, especially regarding how you show up. So whatever role you're in, if you are living and breathing those values and the mindset, you know, in this case in Agile, then you're going to be a better coach or consultant, and you're going to be a lot happier, and how you show up will be a lot more effective for those that you're working with as well, if you're congruent with the things that are important to you and your values. And I think that's, you know, that shine through is quite important as well.
Yeah, I liked what you said about overcoming anxiety and that sort of thing, and using this as a way of doing that. So I think, you know, perhaps when you're presenting or when you're facilitating, that's a really nice way of looking at it. How do I overcome that? Well, I know we're all kind of here for the same reason, so that's really helpful. I was quite interested in that ours was obviously about the team hug, but it was similar to yours in non-attachment, and I saw these as almost opposite things, and yet they were very similar in the way that we interpreted it. I guess the other thing is, what are the gotchas with congruence? You could end up feeling like you're forcing those principles or that way of thinking onto somebody who's not ready for that or doesn't necessarily immediately agree with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and going off of that, if everyone is being congruent with themselves and their emotions and what they really want, you can then sometimes find that when you're being really honest, there isn't an alignment between different people, or maybe there's a decision that was made that's no longer relevant, and it can be difficult because you sometimes have to be really honest about that and then make a change.
And being really honest about that is I wasn't sure what congruence meant.
Yay!
Yeah, so that's a reality for me. So I didn't understand what it was and what it meant. So how would you define it?
I'll make up a definition, but I actually don't know like what the definition is. But it's when things like fit together or work together, they match up, that kind of thing, versus incongruent when they're discordant or disharmonious. Anybody else want to add, or was that okay? Okay. Anybody else want to say something? Thank you.
Thank you. And now we've got curiosity, which I'm very curious to see, because this is the biggest wedge. You want
really curious.
It did. Can you show us your gesture, please? So how is it to come up with curiosity as a strength?
It's that what if question. It's the excitement that you can create with the possibilities that are out there. I'm excited even thinking about it right now.
I could feel that.
You could feel that, yeah? Is that, honestly, that's the thing of what I like to do, is to plant seeds in people's minds that there are things that they could do differently, or maybe, and try.
Yeah. Also that childlike curiosity, you know, that sense of wonder, you know, especially with humanity, there's a sense of wonder because there's no definite, it's so subjective. But what's hard about it is completing something, finishing. I find that's the hardest piece on curiosity, or especially for me. Anyone else?
It's interesting, you seem to be lifting the spirit of, childlike sort of wonders.
I think another one of the challenges is sort of the shiny penny syndrome. Oh, that's exciting, and that's exciting, and never really just wandering off all into the distance, and like down the rabbit hole as well, curiosity. But generally, it's a good starting point as long as you don't get lost down the rabbit hole.
How does it serve you
Well, can I just mention one other
Yes, of course.
issue, which Claire used the word nosy. Some people experience curiosity as nosiness, and it isn't pleasant. And your question was?
How does it serve you in your coaching?
I find at the moment I'm using it literally in everything I do. So when I'm helping coach others, helping them to understand and be curious about the situation they're in, either with people conflicts, either with an actual situation that they're in, dealing with, I know you guys do it, toxic behaviors, but be curious about what's going on. And I also find it helps in some of the principles and the concepts we use, things like active listening. So that's all about curiosity. And so I keep that as a word to kind of trigger in any kind of coaching that I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah, and also with curiosity, you ask more questions rather than telling.
Just to add to that, curiosity, asking questions is a way of creating movement. So it helps you move forward and also find a way if you're stuck. Yeah, so the movement does a lot for you.
Good. Well, there's this notion of, feeling of bubbliness in all of you wanting to talk, which is fantastic. Thank you very much. Last but not least, the wedge where it's a creative wedge. You're going to have to tell us, first to show us what you're bringing and tell us what it is.
So it's like an open circle. So it's an open circle. So it's a space that is not quite perfect, but it allows you can say, look at the open circle like we've got here. We're in an open circle, right? We're creating a little space where anything is possible, where we take in all of these into our circle at some times, but other times we might need to push them away depending on which the context is specific to. And when you look at the open circle, you say, okay, what is it? Is it letting people in? Is it pushing people out? Is it overflowing? Is it filling up? You know, it encompasses so many different things, but also that space is very important because we all get told to deliver more faster all of the time. I'm sure that's a common thing. And it's very important to have that space even within your day to reflect. So you can create a little open circle in your mind to just say, okay, I need some reflection time, and maybe some brighter ideas will come out of this reflection time. But it has, I could go on for hours. I'll let these guys talk.
I think you've said it all.
Anything else you would like to ask?
I think I'll probably add something related to the challenge of having this open circle, or what could possibly be described as a vacuum. And that is, with all the other segments or wedges of the sphere, there is some kind of boundary to them, and that in itself is very helpful for both you that's in there and when you're trying to invite people in. At least there is almost like a pathway for them. With this, the unknown can be quite scary, and that in itself is a challenge. And also, if there isn't some aspect of awareness or control, you can invite things within that nothingness, to put it bluntly, that you don't actually want to exist in there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, everyone.
So now what we'd like you to do is shake off the wheel or the wedge that you're standing in, have a walk around, have a wander around, take your time, and land in the wedge that you'd most like to develop.
Are you starting to land somewhere? It's interesting what's happening, isn't it?
What's happening, Philippe?
Well, I'm seeing some wedges that become completely crowded. Very interesting, very interesting. Disturbance as ally and non-attachment seem to have attracted interest. So now, as before, we're going to ask you to have a conversation within your wedge, and some of them will be busy. I think everybody has at least a pair in the wedge, right, to have a conversation? Yes? And we'd like you to explore and discuss what is the sort of stretch for you to get into that meta skill, and what becomes possible when you're there. And we will ask again, some sound bites, but probably a bit quicker than earlier.
Can we non-attach ourselves from this wedge and talk over there, because it's quite
Sure, you can, or you can push the chairs.
Or can you push the chairs? Yeah, we'd like you to stay here.
To stay in the wheel, actually.
Yeah. Yes. So, did everyone understand the instruction? Yep, so just have a conversation about what this challenging wedge offers you in your coaching. Challenging?
So what's the stretch? What becomes possible?
That's a second. That's a second. Okay, so now we're going to hear from each wedge again, but this time it's just going to be popcorn. So just a few words from what it's like to step into a wedge that's a challenge or a stretch for you. What did you learn? So who wants to go first? Okay, brilliant. So this is disturbance as an ally, yeah?
A colleague here came up with sort of an interesting looking at this in two different directions. So I'd interpreted this as how can I be an ally while creating disturbance? And the alternative view was to say when a disturbance occurs, how can you be an ally of that disturbance? So actually help it grow and to move out and actually have an effect. So it's not you being a disturbance, but it's you seeing whether there's going to be. So we also had a debate about if they're actually going to come to blows, what's the best way of. And we concluded a wide table seemed to be the best mechanism to actually stop a fight breaking out.
That sounds brilliant. Thank you. Okay. What's go next? You guys want to go it? Okay.
Because there's only two of us, we have time to have a rich conversation, and there's so many.
What's the wedge that you're in?
Curiosity.
Okay.
You jumped onwards.
No, it doesn't matter. Popcorn.
So yeah, popcorn. So you're good with that? So yeah, the three dimension that we discovered is obviously there's so many facets to curiosity. So the first one, we go into a new client environment, so being curious about the client themselves, the industry they're in, the challenge they're facing. You can take it to a deeper level and be curious about the people themselves individually. Also, we discussed your idea about the most potent thing is creating the environments where the organization become curious itself.
Right.
About where they are, and it's probably more potent than actually trying to take them into some kind of structured change process, but get them to get curious about where they are and why, and then naturally the change will happen. Did I miss anything?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Sorry, pop.
Popped. Popped.
Pop over there.
So we spoke about how while you aspire to uphold respect, it becomes really difficult to implement and to follow through when you have certain clashes with people.
Sure.
I think as being a change agent, as it's called, it's easy to show respect when you're in agreement with someone who thinks like you, has similar values to you, but it becomes really, really difficult when the person thinks different to you. Yeah. And that's probably the moment where it becomes really difficult. And the benefit you get from kind of stretching that a bit further is the type of quality of relationships that you can establish, and trust is what tends to be the product of that. Yeah. Is there anything else that you guys want to say?
Yeah, so it's a basic human need, say, right? I mean, and this could be a beginning of a wider network. So instead of being a judgmental or something like I'm right or someone is wrong or I'm only right, if we put the respect and the relationship first, I think you're opening a kind of your network and you're going to learn new things. So I'll say it's a first step towards your growth and a kind of learning kind of organization, I'll say.
Sure. It's great.
I normally wouldn't add, but let me just say that one of the things I found funny about this conversation was how easy it was for us to fall into talking about not respecting other people.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good learning.
Two aspects of courage.
Yep.
The courage to act and the courage to let go.
Very good.
Anybody else?
I like that you said let go, because I think that's what non-attachment is all about. And it's, for me, it's turning from this maternal person that wants to care for everybody into Nanny McPhee, so I'm only there when they really think they don't need me. Somewhere?
Yeah, so we were discussing it's hard to not get attached when you're passionate about something, you're really invested in something. And also, when things might start going wrong, it's also healthy, because otherwise, it's almost like a self-preservation thing. Otherwise, if you're too invested and you're too attached, then, you know, you might start suffering yourself.
I would just add on that, I think as human beings or in our job, especially with empathy, like you just naturally tend to really like drawn into, I want to be part of the group and the team and let's do this and that, and you know, that's what we're here for, to do all that. But then, and as soon as you do go out and have socials together, you bond, and you can't help yourself than bonding yourself, and to then be able to take that attachment away and then see it from a coaching perspective rather than I have a natural opinion about all you because I'm part of you. That's super hard.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting.
Just one small thing. So it's also about creating the space to let others develop their own ideas and to express their own feelings as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't see that if you're passionate, if you expect congruence.
Yep. Great. And there was someone at the back, I don't want to marginalise anyone.
Just an observation, as I was sat at the back looking at our subsystem, and there was quite a lot of people in it, and I thought maybe the term that we used earlier of recovering consultants is true of this subsystem. You know, there's maybe quite a lot of us in this group as a whole who are moving more towards people over process, like Simon said at the start, and are ready to grow themselves and let go of some of the attachments that they might have had in the past. So
fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. So who's left? Us. And this wedge, I think, yeah?
Okay.
Yeah.
So for deep democracy, just sort of two quick call-outs. One is breaking down established hierarchies.
Right.
And the second one is trust. And those are probably the two things which, if you need to develop a deep democracy, those are important.
Yeah. Okay. Can I just ask, I'm going to push, and how would that serve the one that you're most familiar with?
I think that the hierarchy is probably the biggest challenge that I have in my work.
Yeah.
People are very used to having that control, loudest person in the room gets the attention, and it's difficult for people who maybe should be listened to and have important views to include them in all of that.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Yeah, just I think within our group we express both ends of the spectrum, where the people who can't get enough democracy, as opposed to having too much democracy
Yes.
as a challenge.
Okay. Oh.
So congruence. So we all had quite different views on congruence and kind of what it meant for us in terms of the challenge and the possibility. For me, the mindset, values, your behaviours, keeping those congruent, and the sort of the challenges under pressure. Do you sometimes slip? Either from external pressure or just through lack of care. And the possibility is, if you can somehow keep that alignment, you're more authentic, and you'll be perceived that way, and more sort of better change agent. Would anyone else like to?
So for me, it was more a question of, how sometimes you might be going on a certain path, and there's a data point or a variable that you somehow don't realise that you're ignoring, but it's actually relevant. And so it's getting to that point where you're actually bringing all the relevant variables sooner than you might otherwise have noticed you should. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. There's this.
There's one over here. Simon.
Yeah, I'll say some popcorn. Nothing and not knowing and being okay with that.
Yeah.
Saying it's about being present. So you've got no agenda and you haven't stuck a label on anyone. You're trying not to stick one on yourself, so you can just do the work as best you can. Won't be perfect. Can't hear me? Can't hear me?
Closer to your mouth.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Terry. Missed you. Okay, I was saying that being present, not attaching, about non-attachment, no labels, and being able to do the work. Being almost in that bubble with the team or with an individual to do the work best you can for them and with them at that time. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so it's debrief time. Would we like to stay standing or take a seat?
I think we sit.
All right, I get the message.
So hang on a moment. Just give yourself a few minutes to just shake off the experience so we can talk about it.
Okay, get to the chair. So what was the experience like exploring the MetaSkills wheel? Let's discuss. Microphone.
Okay, sorry.
I'll do it.
Maybe we should come a bit closer. We all feel a bit far away.
I'll continue.
Yeah.
I felt like it was quite overwhelming, but in a good way, because you take in so many different people's opinions, and you feel them sort of absorbing into yourself. And you say, okay, yeah, I'm kind of feeling things differently, so it's kind of an opening up experience. But at the same point, probably I'll reflect on it and have different opinions tomorrow. But it was really powerful, I thought.
Great.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I like the focus that this brings. So whilst you're in a certain wedge, you focus yourself and your thoughts and your feelings on a specific area, and really challenge yourself to think deeper on a certain topic without your head jumping around everywhere. You're focusing on one specific aspect, and I appreciate that focus.
Okay.
Thank you.
Scott, behind you.
I found it fascinating that there were people in every corner.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, half of these won't get anybody. But there are passengers for every train.
Very good.
So while we were doing it, I messaged my manager saying we should do this with our cross-site locations. And I also think this would be a great activity for people in the leadership team who come up with company values, because Lord knows I cannot stand these posters. They were printed out by some agency that we paid tons of money to, and they make fancy like leaflets out of it, but they don't mean much. And I think doing this actually puts them in the position where they're talking about the type of culture they would like to create in this system. So yeah, thank you, really.
Yeah, and you're raising something that any time we work with organizations, it is generally organizational values that we put in to make them alive about a decision or a topic that people need to make. Sometimes it's team values as well. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I just want to say to you that you're right, the wedges aren't always full. We do sometimes get empty wedges. And that is open and curious around why it's not there as well. Yeah.
Empty wedges in company values.
Yeah, sometimes people don't step into values. Sometimes people don't even know what the values are.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also
You've seen that?
to bring it back to the agenda, it shows the diversity of the community from where you're coming from to where you're going to, or desire to go to. Okay, so next is, and I was just saying that range. So, we talked about the meta skills you were most comfortable with, and then we talked about the meta skill that would have been a stretch for you, that you wanted to explore. And that kind of defines the range that you want to explore as a coach. So what have you learned about this range tonight, and what are you computing right now for your coaching or your leadership when you're going to get back to work?
I think you can get quite a lot from. You can get it's for the camera. You can get quite a lot from drawing a bunch of lines on a floor and putting a bunch of words in them, and get people to actually communicate, talk, and actually solve the problem that you're working on. I think that's enlightening. So yeah, that's why I kind of got out of that as well.
Thank you.
A slightly different perspective. I'm holding back on making meaning, and I'm still sensing. So I don't want to start making meaning of what I've experienced today and continue experiencing it. And maybe sleep on it.
Wise choice.
Okay, for me it's about rediscovering that you need all of these skills, and you've got to be able to know when to use them and to modulate them in the right environment. All of them are valid at some point, but also recognizing your audience and to modulate it, to show empathy for what their skills, what they're in more in tune in.
Thank you. Is anybody else here? Oops. I'm back to you in a sec.
So yeah, so I'm also considering using this. So I do value mapping sessions with my teams, and also we've been looking at doing this for the executive team as well at the company I'm working at. And this, I like this approach. So it's physical, right? So I'm considering bringing that in. I'll certainly talk to the other coaches about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It's really useful, and I think it brings up a lot of questions that you don't think about until you actually stand on those wedges and talk about them. One thing I'm curious about is that we're a sort of open-minded coaching group of people. If you have a load of engineers that are not necessarily so open-minded, I'm interested to see how effective it would be, and I think that'll probably vary case by case, but it'd be interesting to see how it works with some of the shyer engineers. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I work with a lot of them. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Once you unleash, they don't stop.
What I like about this, I mean, I use constellations a lot, and it made me feel a bit like I was in that, but it helped me to feel that I'm not on my own, especially in the bit that I wanted to grow. I spoke to the lady over there, and in the non-attachment wedge, I grew an attachment. So there we go.
That's okay. I think for me, also what I realized is to be present and to know that right now, this is where I'm at. And I didn't have to worry about the other ones for now, because it might change. So I was just present where I was strong, and I was present where I was weak. And I left the others.
Okay, great noticing. Great noticing.
What was others? Oh, yeah.
So I had a moment where I felt really uncomfortable, and that was having to pick a wedge. Because as everyone was talking, you're like, oh, I'm a bit of that, and I'm a bit of this, and I'm a bit of that as well. So I guess that was just something that I just realized how uncomfortable I felt, feeling like I was boxed up because I had to pick a wedge. I don't know what that means, but I just thought, we're open, coaches, and vulnerability is key. So I just wanted to share that, really.
Sure. Does anyone have any ideas? Do you want a response, or do you want to just leave it?
If you have a response. I mean, I understand it's about being present, acknowledging that this is where you are right now, and all that good stuff. But I think sometimes in that moment, especially when I think what it really allowed me to do is understand when I run sessions with the developers how difficult it is for them to choose something. So when you run a retrospective and you say, are you sad, mad, or glad? It's quite difficult to pick a box and then to talk about that. So that's what I gained from it, really, being on their side. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
So I also felt that with which wedge should I choose, and I ended up in the empty wedge, because the empty wedge to me represented all of the others and none of the others. It was like the blank canvas underneath it all, so you could choose any of them and all of them, so you could discuss anything you wanted. So it kind of, I found a home in a non-home place, if you see what I mean. It's like an emptiness, which I don't know if that helps, but.
Yeah, one thing that kind of made me think about what you were saying there, and even whilst I was doing it, was just kind of this idea of I might naturally lean towards one, but what if I were to place myself there? How would I view it then from that angle? Because even just being in that one wedge, you're hearing such diversity of how people interpret it. And that in itself was valuable, and also seeing where people naturally gravitate. So it was cool to see the physical representation of large quantity there, large quantity there, and then it changed, and that was kind of neat to see that natural movement. But I could easily see running an exercise like this and saying, okay, you might naturally go there, but I'm going to put you there. Now only interpret it that way. And I'd be curious to see kind of how they then have to empathize with being in that lens, and how that might change their perspective on their colleague who naturally went there, and they might see things differently. So I just thought that might be kind of a fun thing.
Maybe if I may answer that.
Beautiful application.
Sometimes they may, if they're really settling on where and they connect truly with it, sending them to another one would break that connection.
Disturbance is ally.
So, and you're right, you could increase the range of empathy that exists in the team by doing that. Yeah, yeah.
Isn't that a very British feature to sit on the fence and be nuanced about things, as opposed to other, I mean, with the risk of stereotyping, but maybe British and Japanese?
Maybe.
Whereas the French know that they have to make a decision. And
the French?
Yeah. Still more so, but
what do you think I mean? Yeah, they make a decision and they protest against it. Any other learnings that you?
I just feel like saying that I knew exactly which wedges to go to immediately.
Oh.
And it was great.
Okay.
Well, you had a connection. Anybody else?
Just what you said. I am the German, and I can tell you I struggled just as much actually making that decision. So there you go.
One last thought. I actually would start. I have an approach, and you can tell me it's all wrong. I normally try and start with curiosity, and then I'll probably go and discover this non-attachment. At some point, I will gravitate back to congruity because that's what I want. It's a passion, the things I want to drive in. So I have a bit of a personal journey through this when I do an exercise with a team.
Sure.
There's a journey go through all of these skills.
Yeah.
I tend to start with curiosity.
And that's really what we want you to do is notice the ones that you might not naturally go to, but also know that there's a whole range. I mean, these are just 8 that we've picked, but there's a whole range that you could use in exploring your coaching stance from any of the wedges to see what you can bring for the sake of serving your teams and systems.
And the important thing is that you can intentionally do that. So you can just say, I start with curiosity. So you show up in the morning with curiosity in your head and inside of you. And that will project in the way you work. And then you think, oh, and I'm getting swallowed by the system. I need a bit more of a no attachment. And then you put that hat on, and that will actually drive your behaviors. And it will project and reflect, and you'll be able to be more intentional about it.
So I was just going to ask how many you typically would run a session with. So 8 is 8 your typical number? Or does it vary?
No, 8. We have never done anything bigger than an 8. I'm not sure why, but it's the 80s that we've gone smaller, but not bigger. Yeah.
And generally it's 7 plus the empty.
Yeah.
Because it allows emergence of something new, or if people don't completely connect and they have a refuge somehow, but it's very important what they got to say. So it allows that.
There's someone in the corner. Oops, 2 people.
Getting my exercise tonight.
So do you always use the same 7 plus the empty, or is there some scope that you use for different situations?
You mean the meta skills?
Yes.
The meta skills you use?
There was a bit of debate about which meta skills we would actually bring tonight. So depends on the situation. Sometimes I guess if it's a values kind of exploration, it's the client who would actually choose, because it'd be their values that they'd want to explore, for example.
And then to follow on to that, then was this your feeling, or was there a thought process that you applied to use these particular 7 and empty?
So within the OSC methodology, there are things that we know, meta skills we know help coaching and help learning. So they're the ones that we've used. We had a debate around them. But you can use anything. I mean, these are things that were made up as part of the training, deep democracy and all those concepts, because they're concepts we hold. But you can use other stuff. I mean, if you had children, teenagers, for example, you probably use joy, you might use fun, you might go party. It's not, it's the wedges themselves, the meta skills themselves, you can choose whatever you want. But we've got specific ones that we use that we know help with relationships to explore, like the concept of deep democracy and curiosity. So just know your audience and select the wedges appropriately. Because one thing about being a coach is that you're not unintentional. You are constantly intentional. You're not attached to what the client's agenda is or the outcome, but you are intentionally supporting the system see itself. So you do have to take authority in what you choose, know that it's going to be fine. They'll tell you if it's not fine. You probably have 50 people in the empty wedge. Gives you a pretty good clue.
And we had a thought process to actually bring those, and a lot of debates between our system, and that's actually useful to be a system. You realize that that's where you need the power of 3 brains instead of 1. And that allowed to actually fine-tune for this evening, for this audience, what was likely to be more relevant. So it's, as Nairy just said, it's about being intentional. Absolutely.
There was a bit of a battle between congruence and playful, wasn't there? Congruence won.
When we were having the battle, suddenly everybody was saying, no, actually we like that one.
How do those individuals then share and disseminate what they've learned within that exercise? Is there anything that you encourage them to help pass on their experiences?
Well, this is actually a problem-solving tool. So if you're all a team and there was a topic that you had an interest, or there was an issue that you hadn't resolved this issue, then the idea of this is for you to get some creative ways of looking at the topic from different sides, as you did with the coaching. But there's always accountability in action. What we would have done if you were an intact team is then divide you up into groups, whatever group it is, and what's emergent, how can you now, having experienced this, solve the problem that you are facing. So there's always accountability, there's always action at the end. But about sharing this tool, I mean, if you experience it and you find it useful as a problem-solving tool, sure, there's no reason why you can't share the process of what happened. But it is a tool to get a system to action. It's not, yeah. And so that's a really good place for us to be here. So having experienced this, like what's one action that you could take so that you could apply this to your coaching tomorrow at work? You don't have to share it out loud. You can just turn to the person next to you and just have 1 or 2 minute conversation about what have you learned and what is something that you want to practice tomorrow at work or wherever, at home.
Are you going to show up tomorrow at work?
When you're coaching.
It's not just work, it's at home as well.
Yeah, it's all relationships.
Can be at home as well. Systems are everywhere.
Didn't land very well?
So suppose you have a problem. How would you use that to solve a problem? Because I'm just trying to, I don't want to use that. How would you use it to solve the problem? Because, I don't know, let's say for example you had a problem with the release that didn't go according to your plan. I mean, how would you go about using this
So maybe,
approach to solve the problem?
so you're saying there's a problem.
Let's say for example a release didn't go according to the plan, components were missed, and user stories didn't get deployed to production. That's it as an example. How would you solve that? Use that to solve a problem in this approach?
Do you want me to answer it? Or do you-
I don't know, it's just one question. I'm struggling to understand.
It's not it's not like a root cause analysis tool,
Yeah.
you know, that you would do for very factual things. But a release not working, you may have more complex elements, human elements, let's say, of, well, those people don't really bother, those people don't turn up on time. But there's something behind that. Where are they coming from for that? So you may explore some dimensions, some lenses, and distribute some lenses about commitment, let's say, respects to other. And by exploring those dimensions, you will start driving an empathy for the result, potentially, as a team. And hearing from different dimensions, and that's where you could have more land work for that, which is another tool. But you can explore, if it's really something that they have to explore internally, and then discuss it, and more around the behaviors and so on, that you can use for problem solving, yes. But it's more connected to, it's not for a root cause analysis of
So what you
factual data.
What you could probably do is do a root cause analysis and then put the cause, as if it's obviously got a human element in there,
on some
put that
hypothesis,
into the middle and then explore that using this as a tool.
some hypothesis around behaviors and things like that, maybe. Yeah.
Cool.
So if you had company values, for example, if you put your values into this wheel, then if you have your problem in terms of not being able to deliver this release, you could look and stand and look at this perspective, what this problem we have, or standing from the company value of respect, what has happened in this release from this perspective, standing from this perspective, this value, what has happened from that value, and looking at it from that, what you're doing is rather than just looking at it purely from a factual basis, it comes from an emotional and a connection to what's going on in the relationship space of what's happened in that problem. And often looking at it from all these different views will give a much deeper insight into the human relational problem of which caused that release. Because releases don't go wrong by themselves. There's a human element which made that go wrong.
Right.
And this gives you the insight into what that was, which hopefully then will be able to give you a much better way of making that release happen better next time. Yeah.
You get a separation between perception and behaviour. The first thing you see is perception. What you want to get to is what's the underlying behaviour.
If I may as well, I've got some cases where they're trying to do change and do better sort of release process, better everything. and but we communicated that and we want to do it like that. And then people, oh, I didn't read the email, I didn't know we needed to be involved. So suddenly you start realizing that, yeah, you may have the perfect solution, but if the adoption is not taken care of, for multiple reasons of how people connect to it, then basically you're not going to get a result. And I think that dimension of adoption in our work is very often forgotten.
I think last question. Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, so I was just going to ask if in situations like that, would you apply, like Cynefin, for example, thinking of coming up with different probes to try and change the complex system that the culture, for example, of a company is in. So do you, I guess if I take a step back, do you combine this with other techniques?
You can.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm exploring a lot around Cynefin and ORSC because Cynefin is anthrocomplexity, so it's very similar in thinking, and it complements. Yeah. So sometimes I've run, as part of some ORSC exercise, I've run some Cynefin facilitation in combined ways. Yes, you can. I wouldn't put the Cynefin framework there. No. But you can construct something around that where you have probe hypothesis, but it needs to connect to the relationship, the behaviors, and the people as well.
Exactly. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. You've been a great participants.
Great system.
Yeah, great system. Just in closing, just to say thank you very much for AWA team, but specifically for Charlie, who's just made this like a dream experience. Thank you very much for all of you for coming. Yeah, if you have any questions, ask AWA or come to us. All right?
Thank you.